comparatively, these two teams have never really faced off before, but I just think the type of play South Carolina has gone up against in the past, especially in conference just alone, I mean, this one's kind of a cakewalk. I agree with you, Taylor.
And this is a team that was Old Dominion was 500 last year, made it to the famous Toastery Bowl up there in Charlotte. So it's not exactly like a team that's coming off of a Group of 5 championship or, played a New Year's Six Bowl or anything like that. So on the talent level alone, South Carolina should be able to win this game pretty easily. I know I threw out the score prediction a couple days ago of 63-3. Maybe it won't be that big of a beatdown, but, you'd think somewhere in the area of like 45-17, somewhere around there. That's pretty routine how these kind of games should go.
Yeah, I definitely am expecting to see at least a 30-burger coming out of the Gamecocks in this one at least. But, I think more excitingly, I think it's going to be a great kind of warm-up game for Sellers and some of the new freshmen that are, looking to kind of shake some of the rust off.
And the benefit of having a game like that, and I'm glad South Carolina is starting the season off with a lesser opponent because it gives you the opportunity to work some of the bugs out, right? Especially when you have so much newness to this team, especially at the quarterback position with the offense, all that kind of stuff. I'd rather them take on an Old Dominion, an FCS team or whatever, where they can theoretically go out there, try some things out, kind of get used to gelling together in an actual game type of setting before they go on the road in week number 2 to take on a Kentucky team, as opposed to like last year where they took on North Carolina week number 1. And we had the mess that was that game from the offensive line standpoint, where if you would have taken on Furman in week number 1 or something like that, maybe you would have been able to, figure some things out a little bit more before taking on that better opponent.
Yeah, this is definitely going to help them at least, shake out some of those kinks going into the next 3 games they have, because I know at least that game on the 7th against Kentucky and the 14th against LSU could very much be toss-ups, if anything, not in the Gamecocks' favor. I mean, that game against Akron is looking like the odds will ever be in their favor in terms of for USC, but those next 3 games are not looking like an Old Dominion kind of cakewalk.
I will, and we'll kind of go one by one here. I agree with you. I think Kentucky definitely in that category of a toss-up game. Two programs, excuse me, that are very similar. And also, like South Carolina, Kentucky breaking in a lot of new pieces in new places. New quarterback Brock Vandegrift, a lot of guys from the transfer portal, playing at various spots. And these are 2 programs that have gone back and forth quite a bit these past couple of years. Carolina's gotten the better of Kentucky these past couple seasons, but it's 2 programs that I think are on very even playing fields. And as we've talked about, this game might be the most important game of the season because if you're trying to get to 6 wins, that win at Kentucky in week number 2 is vitally important because if you lose that game, I think you're behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, and I think if they win that game, also kind of stacking up with the Old Dominion game, that's a quick 2-0 start, and then you're taking an opponent that it took arguably your best talent in Radler and Leggett to kind of, knock them out of, to seal the deal in that matchup last year. It took them 2 to, really, with that go-ahead score in the 4th quarter last year, it really took them to seal the deal last year. So I think if there's a bigger showing and it doesn't really take, it doesn't necessarily need to come down to the wire in that game and they come out winning confidently, then they start that season 2-0, that could be the momentum they need to get to that 6 wins early.
And then after that, you have LSU coming in week number 3, and the brand of LSU, like I think in a lot of people's minds would want to qualify that as a long shot type of game. But what we know of LSU from a season ago, and again, as I've said before, a lot can change from year to year in one offseason with a team, but LSU did not do a whole lot to retool on defense. Offense still going to be good. Still got a lot of playmakers on offense. I think, they have the capability of coming in here and scoring some points, but if this offense with South Carolina ends up being what we think it's going to be, this could be a high-scoring shootout. I would quantify this as a toss-up game as well.
It's definitely going to be interesting, especially LSU coming into Columbia, coming into Williams-Brice. It's going to be exciting to see how, I guess, that new team that hasn't kind of worked some of those kinks out, deals with, I guess, this newer look defense as well and this new defensive line. I think that it could really, like you said, it could really result in kind of a toss-up game that would ultimately surprise a lot of people. I know, at least looking on the surface, I would maybe say LSU would probably have an advantage, but, when you have them kind of coming in and some of those kinks they kind of have to figure out, if they haven't figured them out by week 3, it could be a really interesting game.
Right. Akron in week number 4, that's, again, going to be one of those ones that you feel pretty confident that South Carolina should be able to win. Ole Miss after the first bye week in early October, you get Ole Miss coming to town. Juice Wells, a lot of storylines baked into that game. I mean, you have to, in my opinion, quantify this as a long shot. Not saying it's impossible, but what we know of that team right now, and I'm penciling them in to my college football playoff, that is going to be a game that South Carolina is going to be a heavy underdog in. That is likely an Ole Miss team that's going to come in here undefeated. And not to say that South Carolina couldn't be 4-0 themselves, but it's definitely going to be an uphill climb if you were going to try and knock off the Rebels here in early October.
You know, I'm a bit optimistic. I'm hoping that, you know, the game from Akron and, you know, depending on how LSU goes, they could kind of create a toss-up scenario. I know we were talking about if they can get those 2 wins early, they could maybe build some momentum early on. But, you know, if LSU kind of is a lot harder than I guess what we were initially talking about, and they do kind of get that short under the stick in that matchup, then yeah, I could see this Ole Miss matchup being, you know, relatively difficult, even if it's at home.
Same thing's going to go the week after that, going on the road to Bryant-Denny Stadium in Alabama. And yes, I know Nick Saban's no longer the help anymore, but Alabama is still Alabama at the end of the day. Still tons of 4- and 5-star talent on that roster, not to mention the fact that you are going in to one of the toughest places to play in the entire country. Would we love to see South Carolina knock off Alabama? 1,000%. And that would be that would go down, I think, as Beamer's biggest win of his tenure so far. And I guess the Clemson-Tennessee games from a couple years ago were obviously huge. But if you knock off Alabama, even a Alabama without Nick Saban, that, much like it was for Spurrier back in 2010, is a huge program-defining type of win. But it's going to qualify as a long shot as well.
Seeing the hope that that win, the Gamecocks beating Alabama on the road, would probably instill in that fan base, would probably be comparable to the hope that was instilled in my mind when Mark Sanchez beat Peyton Manning and Tom Brady in the same NFL postseason, just so he could go and lose to Big Ben and the Steelers. But yeah, no, I mean, looking at that from this perspective, I mean, if USC wins that game, holy Toledo.
Yeah, and which, if Mark Sanchez proves anything, that nothing is impossible in the world of sports. So, again, I'm not saying South Carolina can't go in there and win that kind of game, but looking at the way these two teams stack up as of right now, and again, our opinions of South Carolina could change drastically by the time we get to that game. Say, man, this is one of the best teams in the country, and then I'm having a different opinion. But where we sit right now, that's going to qualify as a long shot. Oklahoma, a little bit more of a toss-up game to me, so I'll put that in the 2 category because much like we talked about with, you know, Kentucky as well, just a lot of difference from this team a year ago to this year. Jackson Arnold coming in at quarterback, placing a lot of guys in the offensive line, a lot of pieces on defense. Like, there's just a lot about this team that we don't quite know, that I think now going on the road to Oklahoma is going to be tough. But I do think that as of right now, I feel comfortable categorizing as a toss-up.
Yeah, I think a toss-up is very fair. You know, there's not really – I don't think these teams have ever matched up against each other before. So it'd be kind of interesting to see, you know, how their strengths kind of stack against each other. But I think it's going to really – this first showing is really going to, I guess, dictate, you know, how conference play over the next 3 years could really go with these two teams. I mean, Oklahoma recently has seen a lot more high-level play and success compared to the Gamecocks, but – like you said, I think it's definitely posed for a toss-up, especially on the road.
We'll run through these last handful of games here as we get into the month of November, as you do have another bye week after taking on Oklahoma. I think A&M, again, kind of goes in the toss-up category first year under Mike Elko. I do think they'll probably be favored in this game, again, unless the opinions of South Carolina drastically shift between now and then. Vanderbilt, that's, of course, going to always be looked at as a very winnable game, though you never know. Vanderbilt could jump up there and surprise you. Missouri, right now, I'd have to put Missouri as a long shot because, again, one of the best seasons they've had in school history a year ago. They returned so much talent. Got one of the best wide receivers in the country in Luther Burden. Now, you are playing that game at home. That can benefit you a lot. But, man, this is a Missouri team that realistically could only have maybe one loss at that point in the season. Like that is going to be an uphill climb for South Carolina for sure.
Yeah, it also doesn't help the last 5 matchups Missouri's beaten USC. So when you kind of
they've not been able to get over the hump, especially in in Eli Drinkwitz's tenure there.
Yeah, sometimes it's just the matchup. You know, it's just either one thing or one outlier or one just outside source. And I'm not exactly sure what it is maybe between these two guys, but I guess Missouri's gotten the last laugh in the last 5 times these teams have seen each other.
That final 2 games of the regular season got Wofford in the penultimate week of the season. That's another game Carolina should not have any problem with. I put that as pretty confident. And then Clemson in the last week of the season. Now, yes, Clemson's gotten the better of South Carolina for the most part over the past handful of years. Carolina got the win in 2022 and was right there. All they had to do was figure out some things on offense in last year's game, and they could have made it very, very interesting. But Clemson hasn't retold a lot in the offseason. They haven't gotten that much better because they don't utilize the transfer portal or anything like that. So I feel like that is another game that I'm going to classify in the toss-up category.
I definitely want to see them beat Clemson, but I got to agree with you there. It's all going to depend on how they utilize, what talent they've been able to kind of, I guess, develop over the last couple of years.
We'll continue to look at the schedule and the new experiences that the 2024 schedule brings for South Carolina. Let's hear what Shane Beamer had to say about that out of Media Days last week. That's coming up. It is the Extra Point here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head, Sam Shapiro from WAS, along with you on this Tuesday morning. Want to remind you the best moment in Gamecock history since 2000. Starting on Monday, July the 29th, going to be putting up a Twitter poll each day running through next Thursday, giving you the chance to vote on 4 different choices for your favorite Gamecock moment each and every day. Then we'll take the 4 winners from week number 1 and start a final poll that Monday, August the 5th. Final poll run all week, and we'll talk about the winner on the final poll on August the 12th. This is all sponsored by our friends over at Columbia Craft at 520 Green Street down in the Vista. So again, be watching the 1075 Game Twitter account for the best moment in Gamecock history since 2000. Talking about the schedule a lot this morning, I want to go back to something that Coach Beamer said at Media Days last week when talking to local media, as they're getting set to embark on a brand new type of schedule in the SEC with the abandonment of divisions, welcoming in Texas and Oklahoma, which every team in the SEC will play one of those teams. Here's what Coach Beamer had to say about the new experiences that come along with this new SEC schedule.
Oh, man. You really look at all of them when you think about, first of all, the fact that we're not playing in Georgia, Tennessee, or Florida for the first time in, forever, is automatically you say to yourself, okay, there's going to be some new teams and new experiences. But I think, early on, obviously, first of all, we were always excited about the first game. So being able to kick things off in August, jumped out when you look at the schedule. And then for as long as I can remember, it always seemed like when we went to Lexington, it was always in mid-October around Keeneland and March, or Midnight Madness for the basketball team and all that as well. So to see them early on, I found out the schedule. Coach Tanner, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say this or not, I found out the schedule literally on the bus ride on Friday over to Athens last year to get ready to play Georgia. He called and he's like, hey, do you want the schedule for next year? I'm like, I don't know. I'm getting ready to play Georgia tomorrow. Seeing that, but then finding out that early on, Ole Miss and LSU, coming to town, and our guys being able to go experience Norman, Oklahoma, and Tuscaloosa. So it's hard to point at one of them, but it was certainly, you look at it and you realize there's going to be some great experiences for, one, our players, but two, the fans. I can't tell you how many people have, called me, texted me, friends, fans I see around town. They say, we're going to Norman, we're going to Tuscaloosa, we're going to Kentucky. So I know everybody's excited about it, and that's a great thing about the changes in the SEC. Everybody getting to experience new venues and people coming to Columbia as well.
The weather aspect of the Kentucky game is such an underrated part of that, because there are certain places in Kentucky's, I want to say the most northern SEC team. If I'm not looking at a map here, I'm just kind of spitballing in my mind, but one of the northernmost teams in the SEC where, if you play at Lexington, Kentucky in November, good chance it's probably going to be a little bit colder than it is down here. So being able to experience that game in better, warmer conditions in week number 2 certainly could provide a benefit for South Carolina, as well as give a different experience to fans as well. And again, you're not getting caught in the mix of basketball getting ready to start and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, it's almost like when most teams have to go to Denver and play in the altitude, they get the advantage from playing in the altitude. I didn't even think about it like that. All the teams from the conference are used to playing in 70, 80 plus, at that time of year in Kentucky, they're definitely getting some sort of frost in the morning.
Right.
It's definitely going to be pretty cold. And if, you're playing them in November, that's definitely got to give them the advantage.
And, I think the way South Carolina's schedule worked out, you almost kind of have a perfect mix of new and old. So you have 4 teams that you're very familiar with in A&M, Missouri, Kentucky, and Vanderbilt. Those are the 4 teams that you played every single year. And then you get the new blood coming in. You get LSU coming into town, Ole Miss coming into town. You get to go to Alabama. You get to go to Oklahoma. So you get a perfect mix of that. And as far as destinations go, in terms of the grand landscape of the SEC, 2 of the cooler places you get to go are Bryant-Denny Stadium, as well as going out there to Norman and taking Oklahoma, funny enough, in back-to-back weeks.
Yeah, I feel like football is religion in Tuscaloosa. So going on that road trip has got to be once in a lifetime experience, win or lose.
Yeah.
And it kind of stinks that, Saban isn't there anymore, because that definitely would have, I feel like, maybe catered to the experience a little bit.
Sure.
But they're going to get a brand new experience, going this year. This is going to be the first time it's not, everything's not under the Saban umbrella.
Right.
And they're still going to, arguably the football mecca of, college football.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I'm still very jealous. I'm not going.
And that's the interesting aspect of that, because I know there are a lot of people that, to a degree, were relieved that Saban's not going to be coaching anymore, but at the same time, maybe a little disappointed, like, oh man, you don't get the opportunity to go in there and be a Saban coach team, in Alabama, but it's still so fresh. Like, if this was, let's say 10 years down the road, let's say the Kalen DeBoer thing doesn't work out. They've gone through 3 head coaches, and Alabama's a perennial 7-5 team in 2034, and then you're going on the road Tuscaloosa. Well, that game's not going to mean as much as literally a team that's coming off of appearing in the college football playoff, being a couple plays away from playing in another national championship game. And yes, it's not the same guy in charge, but it's still a powerhouse Alabama team until we see otherwise, that I think still has a lot of specialness in what that road trip's going to mean to South Carolina fans.
All I know is I went to a Division III school, Division III college, where every year they would joke after they'd maybe go on a 4 or 5 game win streak. I went to Ithaca College, but they joke, "We want Bama, we want Bama." So hearing like a team has the opportunity to actually go there and seriously play a powerhouse, whether it be Alabama or Oklahoma. I mean, it's almost surreal to think that that they're really getting that opportunity. They're really there are thousands and millions of fans, players that would kill to be in an environment like that. So just getting that opportunity is a once in a lifetime.
If Ithaca played Alabama, what do you think the final score would be?
Oh, geez. Tyler, you're going to do this to me this morning?
You brought it up.
Oh, geez. Well, I have to apologize, my fellow Ithaca Bombers. I'm probably going to take Bama 70-6 on this one. They definitely score one though.
Wait, you think Ithaca could score 6 points in Alabama?
Yeah, our kickers or one of our former kickers was phenomenal. He had a boot. I gotta double check his name, but I remember when I was in school, right after school, we had one phenomenal kicker, and he had a couple, I think, 50-yarders when I think the year after I graduated.
I'm skimming the Ithaca football roster as of right now. I'm struggling to see any wide receivers over 5'10". I'm not liking the size that Ithaca's bringing to the table here.
Well, I'm not saying they're bringing the size or the next NFL, the next Xavier Legette, or
they got hard, is what you're telling me.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think Alabama's going to be scheduling them anytime soon. So I think they'll be okay. But we'll see what South Carolina can do when they go into Bryant-Denny Stadium coming up in the middle of October. And then as well, the Oklahoma aspect. And Shane Beamer does have the ties to Oklahoma, being a former assistant on that staff. But that is, especially for their first year in the conference, something that not a whole lot of people in the conference have gotten to experience up to this point. So getting that out of the way in the first year, and yes, I guess theoretically going to be playing Texas coming up, likely in 2026, whether that be home or away, we don't really know at this point in time. But getting the chance to get one of those road trips, in your first year or in their first year in the conference, I think is pretty neat as well.
Yeah, and like you were saying, Beamer kind of having that previous experience at Oklahoma, definitely is going to give South Carolina an edge that maybe some of the other teams in the conference may not have, just from having that, intel from outside looking in.
Well, and I think you can just kind of let him know what to prepare for. Not that he's going to have a specific game plan for being in Oklahoma, but saying, hey, here's what the fans do, here's what to look out for, this, that, and the whatever traditions Oklahoma has out there that, you can be aware of. So I do think that can help, South Carolina out to some degree. We'll keep with the schedule because Coach Beamer did note that there are a couple teams that South Carolina's not going to be playing that a lot of people would quantify as kind of rivals to them, in their history in the SEC. So who are the rivals now, and what exactly makes a rivalry? We'll dive into that coming up. It is The Extra Point. He is Sam Shapiro from WIS. I'm Tyler Head on your Tuesday on the Game. Want to remind you once again about our friends over at Canty Foundation Specialist. Do you have any signs of issues with your home's foundation? Things like cracks in your exterior brick, cracks in walls or above windows and door frames, doors or windows that might be sticking a little bit, uneven or bouncy floors, or cracks over your garage door. If you notice any of these problems, any of them at all, that could be a sign of serious foundation issues with your home. That's where our friends at Canty Foundation Specialist come in. They will send a professional out to your home to evaluate what's going on with that foundation and let you know what you need to get it fixed up right so you and your family can live comfortably going forward. If you need to schedule an appointment, go online to cantycanfixit.com. That is online at cantycanfixit.com for our friends over at Canty Foundation Specialist. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point Tower Head. Sam Shapiro from WIS along with you on this Tuesday. It is our Who Did the Heavy Lifting segment brought to you by our friends over at TEC Equipment Rental. And in a way, this is heavy lifting, but at the same time, it's not. LeBron James has been chosen as the flag bearer for Team USA at the upcoming Olympics. I believe the opening ceremonies are coming up Saturday night 8-ish on ESPN. He'll be the one quite literally carrying the flag as the U.S. is introduced. The flag itself is not heavy. It's about 2.5 pounds, roughly, between the flag and the staff and everything. But the weight of representing your country at the Olympics, it's pretty heavy load to lift, I would say.
Just a little bit. I mean, probably a little bit heavier than 2.5 pounds.
Probably so. So I found out the weight of this from an article on USA Today when Simone Biles got to do it in 2016 for the Rio Olympics. And, you know, her concern wasn't necessarily with the weight of the flag. It was just the fact that the flag and staff were 2.5 times or twice as tall as she was, because she's 4 foot whatever, and like the flag thing is like 8-9 feet tall.
Right.
So she was kind of worried about the balance of it more than anything else. But LeBron is obviously very tall. I don't think he's going to have any problem with that.
Yeah, unless it's super windy that night, I don't think the aerodynamics are going to play that much of a factor in him, you know, bringing it out.
Well, the commercial at least shows they're going to be on like boats doing the introduction. At least that's what it looks like it's going to be, because there's like the river there in Paris, and I think every country is going to be on a boat, like going through this little canal thing as they're being introduced. That's the way that I understand it based on what I've seen so far. So, I mean, that's cool, you know, because usually you have like the Olympic Stadium and like, you know, everybody kind of walks in, but if you can do it this way, that's actually pretty neat.
I guess they're trying to switch things up a little bit. I kind of cut you off before, but kind of sounds like something out of Game of Thrones.
Maybe so, yeah. I'm definitely interested. You know, I check out the Olympics every single year, and maybe don't get into every single event, but the big ones, you know, basketball, things like that, that kind of captivate more of the general interest. Swimming's always fun to watch. Yeah, that starts this weekend and runs for about the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's preempting a lot of our programming over at the station.
That's right, because you guys are the NBC affiliate.
Because we're the NBC affiliate, so I'm kind of bummed about that. But it'll be exciting to watch. I guess the swimmers typically I think take off in the morning, and then I think they have the divers at night.
Well, and they're going to be in Paris, so that's like a 6-hour difference. So their night is our middle of the day. I don't know. I'm sure there's gonna be things happening like the middle of the night. It's gonna be like around the clock type of thing.
So we'll be watching guys run the 5K. They'll be running it at 10 a.m. and we'll be eating dinner, and then when we'll be eating breakfast, somebody will be doing pole vault at like 7 p.m. at night.
Which I think that creates an interesting experience with the Olympics, especially, you know, like when they're in London, when they're in China, things like that. Just, you know, they're a completely different time zone, so you don't get your typical, like, because when we watch sports here, it's like, okay, things are happening between 6 o'clock and midnight during the week. Or on weekends, yeah, you get a little bit more of the full day type of thing. But yeah, if you can wake up and watch, I don't know, triathlon at 7 a.m. or something like that, like, hey, that's cool. It's something different.
Mm-hmm. And I think the best part about this year's Olympics is going to be, especially for, you know, the first-time athletes that came out in 2020, you know, they didn't really get a normal experience where, you know, you're encouraged to go and talk with athletes from all over the world and, you know, get to, I guess, network with, you know, other athletes in different sports, not just your sport as well. So it's really going to be that first normalcy type of experience, you know, at the Olympics since the pandemic.
Yeah, it'll be the first normal Olympics since Rio back in 2016, because, of course, Tokyo was supposed to be 2020 and delayed to 2021. There's still a lot of protocols in place to where you couldn't have the same interactions. I don't think there were crowds at that one either, if I don't remember correctly. So yeah, this will be the first normal Olympics, at least since Rio back in 2016. But congratulations, LeBron James, for being chosen as flag bearer. Actually had a pretty good game last night as well. In the U.S.'s, you know, what do they call those? Exhibition against,
they're like exhibition showcase games,
friendly, whatever you want to describe it, against Germany, getting set for actual Olympic play coming up. I think they start on Sunday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, they definitely look more promising in that game than they did it comparatively to the one against South Sudan. That one was very close, but I know in both of those matchups, LeBron putting the team on his back.
Right. Absolutely. Getting back to our conversation about South Carolina's schedule for this upcoming season, you heard from that Beamer clip, and this is something we talked about a lot, where Carolina is not going to play Georgia, Tennessee, or Florida, 3 teams that have been on their schedule since they joined the SEC back in the early 90s, because they were all in the SEC East Division. And you could say all 3 of those teams were kind of viewed in a rivalry type of way. Now, are they listed as rivalries in the SEC? Not necessarily. I think the Georgia one was probably the closest to what other fan bases may recognize as a rivalry. But the other ones, again, teams you just played a lot, have some very compelling games with those programs over the years, now no longer on the schedule. You do still have the holdovers of Missouri, A&M, Kentucky, and Vanderbilt. I'll push Vanderbilt to the side because that one doesn't quite qualify there. But these other three have the ability to take on a little more meaning as rivalry type of things now. We talked about this yesterday, Chris and I did, that Missouri is a program that has gotten the better of South Carolina these past handful of years. Eli Drinkwitz has never lost to South Carolina. Even going back to his time at Appalachian State, I don't know if Missouri from the other side views this as a rivalry, but I think South Carolina's fan base is so just dying and adamant to finally beat these guys. I think it kind of takes on a rivalry type of aspect from Carolina's eyes.
I think Missouri is looking at this as the bigger playground bully going, good try, you're never going to be bigger than me, you're never going to be bigger than me. I think really the only thing, the ball's really in the Gamecocks' court in terms of ever solidifying this as a potential conference rivalry. I mean, like we were just talking about before, the last 5 matchups, Missouri's won, and that last matchup, Missouri won 34-12. But I think if, the Gamecocks come knocking on their door and then, they beat them in a contest 34-12 or with a margin that big, then the next time Missouri comes knocking on their door, they're going, hey, we got to get you back. And then if they don't, that's how rivalries get started.
Yeah. Yeah, this has definitely been a rivalry, if you want to call it that, of swings. So when Missouri joined the conference back in 2012, Carolina got the first 2, Missouri got the next 2, Carolina got the next 3, and then Missouri's just been on the streak ever since then. So it's kind of been one of runs. It seems like South Carolina is finally due. But if you can have a little bit more of that back and forth between these two schools, I do think it can kind of take on a little bit more of that rivalry aspect there. The A&M thing, and I've talked about this before, A&M was kind of assigned as Carolina's rival when they joined the SEC because everybody had to have a crossover opponent every single year. And the A&M thing, and Carolina, was able to get one over on them a couple seasons ago back in 2022. But I just don't think it has the teeth of a rivalry necessarily. I think it's just more kind of something that's been forced upon by the SEC that I don't know if people buy into quite as much on either side.
I think it's one of those things people need to, I guess, divert less attention to, maybe back off for a couple years, and then all it takes is just one major game when everybody forgets, and then that just re-stirs the pot back up. But like you said, I think because it's kind of that narrative has kind of been kind of stitched in almost involuntarily that these are the two teams that should be pinned against each other.
Right.
People are kind of treating it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if people kind of watch it more organically, not in the, under the same lens of, this has to be a conference rivalry, it'll kind of take away from it and hopefully potentially create a more organic rivalry in, potentially 3 or 5 years.
And the last one is Kentucky. And this is one that both programs kind of look at each other very similarly. We talked about that week 2 game being very much a toss-up where Carolina says that's a game we should win, and Kentucky says that's a game we should win as well. This one, to me, I think might have the best teeth of potential budding rivalry as the years go by if you continue to see Kentucky every single year.
Oh, I totally agree with you. One, because, the last game especially was so back and forth, tooth and claw. And like you were kind of saying, a lot of it can decide long-term momentum for both of these teams, going into this season. I know we were talking about earlier in the show, if USC can come out on top early after this Old Dominion win, they start out 2-0 and they're starting out on some hot momentum. So I think, when there's a team like that could potentially put you in a position to either, sink or swim, then absolutely, yeah, they definitely have some rivalry connotation to them.
Remind you, the game, the Hardys teaming up to make sure school students in Richland 1, Richland 2 school districts have the supplies they need for the upcoming school year. You can join me and help donate some supplies this Saturday between 2 and 4 p.m. at Hardys out at 3852 Rosewood Drive. Again, from 2 until 4 p.m. First 100 folks who donate will receive a coupon for a 3-piece chicken strip meal from Hardys as well. So again, come join me from 2 until 4 Saturday, 3852 Rosewood Drive. We'll come back, wrap up today's edition of The Extra Point, talk a little college football 25, some patches on the way, or some glitches in early gameplay. That's next here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head, Sam Shapiro, WIS, along with you here on your Thursday. What am I talking about? It is your Tuesday here on the game. We'll get into talking about college football 25 a little bit here in a second, but I do want to remind you, Ultimate Season Ticket starting July 29th, one winner. We get season tickets to all South Carolina home football, baseball, women's and men's basketball games, just like they did a year ago. Listeners will register by going to 1075thegame.com. Just like last year, we will announce the 3 finalists. They will have to show up at the Summer Golf Tournament at Charlotte Golf Club coming up next month. We'll announce the winner there. It's all sponsored by our friends at the Men's Clinic at the Irmo Professional Center. So again, be on the lookout for the Ultimate Season Ticket on 1075thegame.com. So we are now right at a week since the early edition of College Football 25 dropped, where I brought this up yesterday. 2.2 million people paid about $30 to get early access to the game. By my math, that's about $66 million in just early access alone. So ESPN not hurting for money when it comes to the new game. But like with every new game, there are going to be some bugs that do have to be worked out, some things that have to be adjusted. And EA Sports yesterday did put out on their answers.ea website that they are working on some of the new bug patches to fix some of the early issues with the game. But I will say this, having played it for a couple days myself, the things that I've noticed have been a problem, nothing egregious. Now I've not gotten to the end of a season yet, and I know some people were complaining about the rankings not being reflective of how they would be in real life. That's supposed to be one of the things fixed. My biggest problem was probably some of the offensive line blocking, which I know they said they're going to address, like the tackle spots, maybe whiffing on too many blocks there. But overall, I think the game as a whole, from where it started, very solid in my opinion.
Yeah, I know we were kind of talking about it. I haven't had a chance to pick up the game myself yet, but I was mentioning to you earlier, I saw a clip, some guy got kicked funny in one clip, and it's just interesting. The reason I brought it up to you was because, people are paying $30 extra to play a $70 game a week early.
Right.
And, you're already reporting issues with it. To me, it just seemed like the holdout for it was long enough. You just, and obviously, there's going to be kinks and issues with any game that comes out.
Right.
But when you see issues like there are incorrect logos for Stanford, UMass, Western Michigan, Jacksonville State, FIU, the SEC, and the Sun Belt conferences, it's like, come on. Well, especially with the SEC. I mean, we're a little biased, but they're one of the most dominant conferences in college football.
And that's kind of the funny thing. I mentioned this yesterday or the other day, where I do miss the days where when you bought a game, it was just the game was done and you didn't have to buy like DLCs or anything like that as time goes along. One benefit, though, if there is something wrong with the game, they do have the ability to go in there and fix it, which, again, I can understand, especially with how in-depth this game is. There are going to be small little things, which, again, like logos and stuff like that. That's not detrimental. It's not like the game is broken where you can't get in there and play it. I've played games on PlayStation where it's just beyond awful, where even patches aren't going to fix it very much. So small little details like that, I think, are very understandable and manageable. It's a pre-download to fix these kind of things, to where, again, we're a week into the game. And there's a lot of things, too, that developers, as much hours as they spend in the game, may not notice a detail or something like that. So it's good that you have the community has the ability to let you know, like, hey, fix this, fix that, and then go in there and fix it. And again, the games should be fine after that.
It's nice they can utilize public input, and the younger generations are spoiled in this regard, that they can kind of take those complaints to the higher ups while there's the game's still fresh and still on the forefront of everybody's minds, so that they can fix that while it's still of interest to everybody. And in probably months' time, a lot of these issues will probably be fixed.
Absolutely. So again, that's the early patches there. When you do finally get to play the game, I'd recommend throwing a go route to Nick Harbor. He is one of the 2 fastest players in the game with 99 speed. And it's really funny to me, the amount of people that are like just discovering him in the game that, again, may not know anything about Nick Harbor. And, some people may have heard about his track stuff, but haven't got to see him on the field in real life do these things that he's been projected to do. But, like, by the time the season gets here, I think he's going to be known pretty far and wide just for his abilities in this game alone.
Yeah, something about 99 speed is like makes a player. I feel like they have the 99 speed, but the 75 overall. It almost gives them more value than the guy that's the 85 or the 90 or overall that has maybe like 87 speed or an 85 speed. But so kind of going off that, I guess my question for you is, do you prioritize maybe like the guys that have 99 speed and like 80 acceleration, or do you kind of look for those guys that have more like 94, 93 speed, but then also like 88, 89 acceleration?
Yeah, I guess it kind of depends on what you're doing offensively. I like to run more of like a traditional spread type of offense, and I like to do things a little bit more, laterally than vertically. I do hit some things down the field, but I like going with like slants. There's a like the jet like quick pass to a receiver across the middle that or in motion. That's a really good play in the game as well. So that's kind of things that I like to utilize. And I've not got to use Harbor in that kind of situation, but I imagine he'd be pretty good in that too.
My favorite play, HB toss to the left.
Yeah. Hey, that's old school. Nothing wrong with that. That'll do it for today's edition of the Extra Point. Coming up next, it is the Garner Trust Hour. Myself and Chris Clark will dive into more things going on with South Carolina as we get set for the 2024 football season here on your Tuesday on the Game.